A woman is accused of repeatedly shooting her boyfriend. He miraculously survived, and then she is let out of jail on bond. We have to break this story down, and we're going to do so with former prosecutor Anthony Osso, who is from this area, because we need to make sense of this. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. What would you say if I told you a woman accused of luring her boyfriend out to a field only to shoot him multiple times, literally until the gun ran out of bullets, is now out on bond? What? Yeah, that's what we're talking about. I'm talking about 23-year-old Alexys Pinto. She is charged with aggravated assault in connection with the alleged attack on Elvis Munoz. Now, this happened just last month out in Houston, Texas, and the reporting indicates that the two apparently got into a fight at home. This was over a client dropping off a car at Munoz's house to fix because Munoz is a mechanic. And then it gets physical as she allegedly tries to hit him. He grabs her. And then during the course of this, she somehow allegedly convinces him to take her to this field to seemingly watch a sunset. Little strange, but anyway. They go there, they arrive, she jumps out of the car and she starts running. He reportedly tries to catch up to her, and at one point, she allegedly turns around and says to him something along the lines of, "Teach me about deer hunting," kind of odd statement, and then she allegedly pulls out a gun and shoots Munoz in the chest. She then allegedly shoots him again in the hand. He says he tries to run away, he falls over. Pinto is hovering over him, allegedly says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do you like that. I didn't shoot you in the right places." And before she could get another shot off, potentially at his head, Munoz reportedly was able to block the shot. So in total, he was ultimately reportedly shot in the chest, the stomach, and both of his hands. And during all of this, she apparently is able to make a call afterwards to someone and says that it was Munoz who shot her. And he reportedly says in the background, "No, I didn't. No, I didn't." And then she even reportedly told Munoz, when he had asked her to call for an ambulance, that she didn't mean to do it like this, that it was supposed to be quick. So she reportedly helps him to get to his truck, takes him to a gas station for help. The ambulance arrives. He's taken to a hospital, has to have multiple surgeries. Luckily, he survived this, although I should tell you, he has scars. He is disabled in the sense that his limited mobility in his hands. Remember, he's a mechanic. Really just a bizarre graphic crime here. And now we go to the bond, okay? So after her arrest, her bond was originally set at $75,000, but then it was lowered by a judge to $10,000. She posted that, and she was released pending her trial. The question, of course, is why? Why would that be the case? Why would the bond be reduced? What a crazy case this is, my gosh. But look, we appreciate being able to bring you stories like this. And for that, I want to call out our sponsor who helps make shows like this happen, Upside. Now, if you don't know what Upside is, it's great. It is a free app that helps you get cash back when you buy gas, groceries, food. This is real money, real cash back, money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer right into your bank account. Look here. I used Upside to find a gas station. I claimed an offer. I pay with my credit card at the pump, followed the steps on the app. I got cash back. It is so simple to use, and you can use it at all different kinds of places, restaurants, convenience stores. So to find out how much you can earn, you can click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen. And make sure to use our promo code Sidebar because you get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Hope you can check it out. But going back to Munoz for a second, the alleged victim in this case, he spoke with local media, KPRC2, and he talked about how he is in legitimate fear now that his ex is out. He said, "She's a danger to the community, to children, to family and friends, and to me as well. She's not just a danger to me or my friends because she knows where several of my friends stay at home, but most importantly, my family. I have little nieces, my sister and nephew, my mom and my dad." Now, per her bail condition, she's not allowed anywhere near Munoz. She has to wear an ankle monitor, but still, you can see why this might be a bit outrageous, why he might be fearful. I want to bring in Houston attorney Anthony Osso, who is somebody who was a former prosecutor specialized in domestic violence cases. Anthony, thanks so much for coming on here. Before we even get into the details of this, I got to ask you the $10,000 question. Why in these cases could a judge reduce something from $75,000 to $10,000, seemingly knowing this suspect who is accused of a very violent crime could get out, and she was able to post it and get out? You have to explain that to me.
No, I think it's a good question, Jesse, because from the outside looking in, you know, most people wouldn't agree with that decision. The judge has absolute authority to set the bond amount at an amount that they think is fair and appropriate to make sure that the defendant doesn't commit an additional crime or is a danger to the community or the victim in the case, and also to ensure their appearance in court. So it's the law that allows her to reduce the bond from $75,000 to $10,000.
According to a form that was apparently signed by the judge in this case, there's a note that says that Pinto was found to have a mental illness or to be a person with an intellectual disability. Is that the factor that resulted in the lowering of the bond?
Yeah, I think it's something that the judge probably took into consideration. But defendants have access to mental health treatment within jail facilities too. So I don't think it's a singular thing. I think the judge probably took other things into consideration, like prior criminal history, but I'm sure that the judge in this case took into consideration a mental illness as well.
And to be clear, and I don't have the full details about this, would a judge unilaterally just lower the bond on their own, or would there have to be some sort of motion petition by the defense to say, please lower the bond?
That's a good question, Jesse. It really depends entirely on the case and on the judge. I think, for instance, possession of marijuana case, judges in Houston probably have different sentiments towards the prosecution of those cases. So in a situation like that, a judge might sua sponte say, hey, I'm going to lower the bond. I imagine in a more serious offense like we have here, that was probably the result of the defense filing a motion to lower the bond, or something like that, and then the judge reviewing factors and hearing some argument from the parties.
Just to be clear, though, it doesn't necessarily mean the judge is persuaded by her arguments, in the sense saying, well, maybe this was an assault, maybe she was acting in self-defense or something like that. It doesn't necessarily go to the merits of her case or Munoz's allegations, right? Or just tell me if I'm wrong there.
No, it does go towards the merit. I mean, as far as the merits go, I think what the judge is looking at is the severity of the crime and the likelihood that the defendant will commit an additional crime while on bond. I don't know that they're really taking into consideration the defenses in the case. I think they're just taking into consideration more what actually happened as far as the level of violence.
And the argument would be, this is an isolated domestic violence incident. The likelihood of her being a danger to the overall community or committing a similar crime would be low. The reason I say this, we covered the Diddy case, and the whole issue of bond there is, if he was on the outside, he would continue to commit crimes. He has a pattern of committing crimes for years. If you just have an isolated yet unfortunate domestic violence incident, that may not be enough to say that someone should have such a high bond that they're not released, right?
Sure. I mean, I imagine that's what the judge probably relied on, and I'm sure that's what the defense attorney argued. Again, we weren't there, but those are sort of the standout arguments are, this was a first-time offense by Ms. Pinto, and I know they talked about some violent or at least abusive history between Munoz and Pinto, but like you said, Jesse, it's an isolated incident, so there's not a huge concern at this point that she will commit that offense again.
Why wasn't she charged with attempted murder?
That's a great question, and I think when I was a prosecutor, I would file aggravated assault cases. Many of the complainants that I would speak with asked that same question. But in order to prove murder, you have to prove an intent to kill. And so when you add attempted to any case in Texas, it's going to lower the punishment range down a singular degree. So murder, if it's attempted, becomes from first degree to second degree. Aggravated assault is second degree. And so from a prosecutor's perspective, why would I try to prove intent to kill if I already have evidence that she used a deadly weapon in the act? It's an easier case for me to make with the same punishment range.
And what is that punishment range?
So in Texas, it's 2 to 20 for aggravated assault. And because there was a gun used in the case, it's what we call a 3G offense, meaning that for whatever sentence is served, the defendant will have to serve at least 50% of that sentence before they're eligible for parole.
In a case like this, taking these facts as true, if she were to go to trial and be found guilty, would she be looking at 20 years in prison?
Absolutely. In my experience, I've tried cases that are second degree and juries will max people out. She's a first-time offender. I don't have all of the backstory between Munoz's and Pinto's relationship, but it's certainly possible that she's facing that kind of time. The law certainly allows for the jury to assess that punishment.
Do you think she has any grounds to say, going back to it, that I was defending myself. He tried to shoot me. You think, I mean, again, a lot of this we're getting from his side, but he's also the one who sustained so many injuries. You can't deny that he was shot multiple times. So talk to me about the idea of, could she reverse it and say, you know, she was defending herself? I don't know.
No, it's hard to say whether she will be able to or not until I took a good look, or whoever the attorney is takes a good look at the evidence. I mean, there's a lot of things that investigators can do in this case. And I want to hear that 911 phone call that was made to the authorities. I'd want to look at the physical evidence of where the gunshots were. And I'd also want to know what was the range at which the gun was fired, because I think that's a big deal when you're talking about self-defense. Maybe perhaps gunshot residue on the hands. Was there a struggle over the weapon? And was Munoz carrying a weapon or anything that he could use to cause injury to Ms. Pinto? So it's hard to say at this point, and I'd be interested to see what the evidence, how that all shakes out.
What about mental health? Going back to that issue, if we're talking about bail, talk to me about the issue of mental health as a defense, because it's so weird, right? If you take these facts, she allegedly shot him, then seemed to regret the way she shot him. I'm not trying to make it laugh, but make it light, but she was like, I wanted it to be quick. Then she helps him get an ambulance. It's a very confusing moment. It makes me wonder, was this a heat of passion sort of thing? Was this a mental health break? Then again, if the idea was to lure him to the field so that she could do this, I'm torn by how bizarre this is. Walk me through what we should be thinking about in terms of mental health defense, whether state of mind would lower this somehow. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so in Texas, mental health comes in really in two instances. It comes in as far as competence. Are you competent to stand trial? So that's not necessarily a defense. That just means, are you able to stand trial? And then you have insanity. I don't see this being an insanity case because you have to display that there was no recognition of the consequences of your actions. I think mental health here is probably going to be mitigating at best. I don't think that that will be the defense that gets Ms. Pinto out of this charge. And as far as sudden passion goes, I've tried sudden passion cases, and in those cases, things have to happen instantly. And here, like you mentioned, Jesse, the luring out into the field to watch the sunset, that seems premeditated, which is not really consistent with the suddenness that the sudden passion law requires.
And by the way, for aggravated assault, it's just an intent to harm. It's an intent to cause serious bodily injury.
For intent to cause bodily injury, what makes this case aggravated is that she used a firearm. Right. So that aggravates it. There are other ways to get there, but in this case, it was the gun. Going
back to protecting him and his family, is there any restrictions? I mean, I mentioned before that she's not supposed to be in contact with him. She has the ankle monitor. Is there any way not only to ensure that he is safe, but his loved ones? I talked about before how he's nervous about his family and friends. Any restrictions the court can put on her in that way?
So it's very unlikely that the court will specifically name family members of a complainant in a case like this, or really any case, unless they're witnesses to the offense. But I imagine you've got two protective orders really in family violence cases in Texas. You've got a magistrate's order of emergency protection, which is the law requires any family violence case that is put in place by the judge lasts 90 days. Then you've got just the court's bond conditions, and that can last through the pendency of the case. And I imagine that both of those probably restrict Ms. Pinto from going to the residence where Mr. Munoz lives. And certainly she could add the names of the family members in the bond conditions if the judge in this case chose to.
I want to just go back to what we're talking about here. So Munoz spoke to local outlets. He told KPRC, I told her that I loved her and I still wanted to be with her. I wanted to still grow with her, have children with her, and just basically try to get into her head to convince her to help me. So he was talking about what he needed to say to her to convince her, get me an ambulance, okay? Don't leave me here to die. That is a really, really harrowing description of what happened. And then you couple that with what he told KHOU, where he said, you're willing to take care of someone and love them so much for 3 years, and for them to pay you with bullets, try to take your life. You know, you've covered these kinds of cases before. What do you make, if this is all true, what do you make of this kind of attack?
I think My understanding is that the relationship was ending, or it had ended, or was coming to an end. And so it really goes back to the cycle of violence. And one of the dangerous times in any relationship when you have a very controlling partner is when there's an end to it and they no longer have you in their life. And so I think here you've sort of got this like manipulation cycle. And ultimately, when the relationship was ending, or she lashed out in violence. And I think it's a display, Jesse. Most of the time when we look at these cases, it's male on female violence, but it can happen the other way around, as we see here.
Anthony, this is quite the case. I'm so happy we got you on, especially since this is your area, your jurisdiction, and your area of expertise to talk about this, because I'm trying to make sense of it. It is a really, really disturbing one. Anthony Osso, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. Good seeing you.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.